Hi, I'm Karen, and this is the Mental Health Hope You're Not Alone podcast. This space is all about breaking the stigma of mental health, where we'll share personal stories, helpful online resources, and meaningful insights, all with one goal in mind: to remind you that you are not alone in your mental health journey. Hello, hopefuls! I am so happy to be back and recording this podcast in this episode. It has been quite a month. I've added some videos to kind of give you an idea of what's been going on, but I'll do a quick overview. About a month ago, I went back home to help my parents kind of figure out their future, if you will, give them some ideas on how they can continue living in their home and financial stuff or whatever. And also, too, just to see them. I was thrilled to just see them because it had been over a year. And while I was there, I did go out with some friends. And I actually did do an episode between now and then and was talking about how I lost a friend during that time, and I still think about him. He's not dead. He's alive, but it just was, I guess it's probably a long time coming with that friendship. I do care greatly for him, and I hope for the best for him. But the more I've thought about it, maybe our friendship was toxic. I don't know. I don't want to pin that on our friendship, that title. But anyway, so then I came back, and about 2-3 weeks later, I went back to my parents, her hometown, to help take care of my parents. My dad had surgery and was needing help to recover, and my mom has dementia. And so between the two of them, it was necessary that my brother and I went to help. And my brother was there a couple of weeks before I got there, and then I came in to kind of relieve him and give him a break. And so I was there for a week and a half. I did extend it because my dad wound up in the hospital due to complications to his surgery, and so I ended up staying about 4 or 5 days longer than anticipated. But I was happy to stay. That also gave my brother some time at home with his family. So anyway, parents are doing better. Dad seems to be recovering fairly well with the surgery. And then my mom actually seems to be doing better with her dementia, given the amount of interactions she's had with people and going to visit my dad in the hospital. And as her doctor mentioned to us, that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so she really wasn't having much engagement with people, and she wasn't doing much exercise anymore. And so all that changed when my brother and I were there, and so we started noticing some changes in her, which were really positive. And so I hope and cross my fingers that continues, because I think that will obviously benefit her, but my dad would appreciate kind of having her. She's not back to who she was, but having her in a different state where she could be more interactive with him. So anyway, so that was that. And then I just got back, I guess it was last Thursday, and I've just been trying to catch up with stuff around the house. And so anyway, so here we are. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this episode. And the reason for the topic I wanted to do for this episode is because of how I felt when I was back in my hometown. And while I've lived where I'm currently at, which is on the East Coast in a really highly populated area, that my anxiety and depression has certainly gotten worse, to the point where I was diagnosed with agoraphobia. And I've been trying to get out of that by exposure therapy, and that was the reason for that was, or part of that was, my assignment was to get out of the house, and that's where Pilates came in. And so I've been doing Pilates. It started initially in April, and I was doing about 2 sessions a week. Within a month, I had increased my Pilates to 3, and 3 days a week, and now I'm up to 4 to 5 days a week. And so that has really helped get me out of the house here with respect to going to Pilates, but I'm really not doing much else. But it is my assignment this weekend to go to the farmers market that is nearby, and I've heard great things about it. What I'm hearing is that it's a good farmers market, obviously for your typical like fruits, vegetables, and things like that, but they also have like artists booths and things. So I'm really looking forward to that. But the whole idea where this came from is how different I felt when I was back home versus how I feel when I'm here. And back home, I felt, I won't say normal because I didn't feel like I used to when I lived there, but I felt really good. I was getting out and doing things. I was going to the hospital to visit my dad every day, and I was interacting with my mom and going over to their house because I did have an Airbnb. So I tried to work while I was there. And I even made comments about, hey, I'm going to go down to the grocery store and pick up some food versus what I do here is when go grocery shopping, I actually have it delivered. And I did have a few things delivered there when I was back home. But I went shopping one day to pick up some things at Walmart. I intentionally left the house to go to Walmart, and I don't do that stuff here. I don't leave the house intentionally and go to the grocery store. I don't go to Walmart. I haven't honestly done that since I first got here, which has been over 2 years ago now. And so I just was noticing these differences. I did go out with a friend while I was home this last time. We went to lunch, and I had no problem going to lunch. I had been to the location before, and the whole feeling was different. And even driving around felt different. My demeanor behind the wheel changed to what is typical for me driving in that area versus what is typical for how I drive here. The traffic is so bad where I live. I just kind of put my patience on and get through traffic as best I can. Whereas back home, there's traffic, but it's not anywhere near where I currently live. And I just try and bust through the traffic as quickly as I can. And I used to do that when I lived there. So there was just a lot of differences about how I was feeling being there, how my anxiety was even lower than what it is currently where I'm currently living. I didn't give it a second thought about leaving the house, whereas where I'm currently, it's a whole big thing where I have to prepare myself to leave, and I still have to do that somewhat with my Pilates classes to get out of the house. But once I'm there, I feel okay. It was all those differences and realizing that currently where I'm living, I believe, certainly has an effect on my anxiety and depression. And so I wanted to explore that and see what there was out there that talks about that specific topic, because I don't know, I had never really thought about it. Or here I'd thought about it, but I hadn't. It was different than other times that I had gone back home because this time I actually was stayed in my hometown. Whereas before I was staying in the city, but where my parents live is in the suburb of a medium-sized city. There was that difference of actually being in my hometown and driving around, and it was very surreal, especially since this town itself has changed a lot in the last 30 years because I haven't lived in that town since 1995. So anyway, I wanted to explore this a little bit and talk about the various subjects that we encounter on a day-to-day basis that can also really affect our anxiety and depression. And so I wanted to talk about like city life versus small town where I live now versus my hometown, and the differences between those two. Maybe the importance of having nature around and places to go to, walk on a trail. Or one of my favorite things I used to do where I used to live near my parents in their hometown was there was a lake that had amazing trail system and that I used to go and ride my bike. I remember one time I was training for an organized ride that was going to be the 50 plus miles of riding my bike, and I hadn't gone much more than 20 something. So I wanted to get some time in the saddle, and so I ended up going to this lake and I got in 40 miles, I think, just on the trail system that was up there. And I loved it. I would go in the morning. It was really peaceful. There was hardly anybody there. And of course, it was by the lake, which I love water. The whole area itself just was gorgeous. It had wildflowers. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And so things like that, things that maybe were easier to have access to that may not be easy now because of where I live. And then the other thing that matters, and this is interesting, what type of weather is there? For me personally, I absolutely loathe hot weather, hate it, not a fan of the summer. Used to own a pool, loved it, would stay out there for hours and just sit around and float, and it was awesome. And I wish I had never given up that land to move into a job that started my anxiety. My whole world changed with that decision, and I'm still living with that decision, and I regret it. But anyway, so we're also going to talk about the home environment and how we can make that better and what it is about the home that could make you feel comfortable. The reason I say that is because I've lived now in this home for 2 years and I still hate it. I hate where I live. It is absolutely boring. I normally go for places that have a unique style or are just overall cute and just kind of different, have character. And my current place has none of that. It is absolutely boring. I absolutely hate it. And I'm trying to make it my own by upgrading things and adding certain things, but it's not helping. I still hate it here. I still hate this house. But anyway, and then the other couple things we'll talk about is what if moving isn't possible? Because, like, right now, I'm in a job where I like it, but what else is out there for me? And will I move because of it? And so, right now, moving, though, is not possible. What can we do with that? And then also, to the last thing here is talking about relationships. Because when I went back home, I was in contact with my friends while I was there. I went and had lunch with one of them. I don't do that kind of stuff where I'm currently located. To be quite honest, I don't have a lot of friends here. I have a lot of acquaintances because there are a lot of people around here that I know, but I don't have friends. And as a matter of fact, I even tried to reach out to somebody who I was trying to be a friend with, and for whatever reason, he ignored my text. So I suspect that I probably won't text him again because it takes no time at all to text somebody. Let's talk initially about just how an environment and where you live affects your mental health. This article is from the American Psychiatric Association, and the title is City Living and Mental Well-Being. So it says more than half the world's population lives in cities, and the number is expected to continue to increase in the coming decades. Living in urban areas has been associated with increased risks for mental disorders, including anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. Research using functional magnetic resonance imaging has identified changes in the brain indicating that urban upbringing and city living are linked to social stress processing. Among the potentially contributing factors to poorer mental health in urban areas are air pollution and other exposure to toxins, increased noise, lack of open space, crime, and social inequalities in the stress of sensory overload. On the other hand, cities can provide advantages such as better access to healthcare and education and potential for social interaction. Urban environments vary greatly and many factors can play a role. So, for example, one study found that neighborhood characteristics, including social cohesion, pleasantness, and safety, were associated with lower levels of depression. I want to talk a little bit about that. So, when I was telling a friend of mine how I felt between the two, and I felt different from where I live currently, and she immediately said that you probably feel safe and comfortable there. And she's exactly right. Like, I left my car door unlocked, and I left my parents' door unlocked occasionally and didn't give it a second thought. Where I currently live, my car has been broken into twice, and once it was stolen. I had somebody coming by at like midnight who I didn't know and was trying to get in. He looked like he was lost, but nonetheless, there was still somebody sitting on my front porch trying to open my door. And that just freaked me out. And so, a lot of this, what this article here is saying, is that that is very true. I do feel a sensory overload when I have to go into work, which thankfully isn't all that often because I have to deal with the noise of getting there. I tend to not drive to work with music on because of that. And I even go early in the morning just so I don't have to deal with the people and have to potentially have to sit next to somebody. It all adds up to how uncomfortable I feel living here. It does not feel like home. The people here are rude compared to the Midwest and where I'm from. And that even was evident when I was driving back home. This was the first time I was driving back home, and I was at a hotel because it takes me 2 days to drive home. And I was at a hotel staying the night for after the first day of driving. And I had forgotten something in my car. So I went out to go get it. And as I was walking back into the hotel, somebody was coming out of the hotel and we passed each other. And I really wasn't even going to say anything to him. And I just looked up and he said hi. And I said hi back. And I was like, ooh, that's different. And the reason I say that is because where I'm currently at, nobody does that. They avoid you like the plague. If I take my dog on a walk, they will go out of their way to not pass by me. And I think part of that is because I have a dog. But and then how I do the same thing. Again, part of that is because I have a dog. But I had some woman today walk by me as I was walking my dog. And I tend to get off the sidewalk for them so they can walk by and not feel uncomfortable. Because a lot of people don't feel comfortable with other people's dogs. And so I give them the sidewalk to walk. And she didn't look at me. She didn't say hi, nothing. And if I would have been back home, that person probably would have said hi. Maybe even stopped to pet the dog. I don't know. So it's just differences like that. The social interaction is different. Of course, the crime is way different. I would consider this a high crime area just because crime is everywhere. Where I'm from, there are of pockets of areas that have a higher crime rate. But there's so much difference between here and there. And so it isn't any wonder now that I've given this some thought that I feel this way here. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe. There's no social interactions for me. There's certainly increased noise, although where I was staying, it was really close to train tracks, and so I heard the train a lot, which didn't really bother me because I was facing away from it. I was on the opposite side. I stayed in an apartment, and I was on the opposite side of the apartment, so it wasn't terrible. But here, I've got traffic that's can be noisy. I have an ambulance or fire truck that's nearby that can be noisy. There's always somebody out walking around. Like this morning when I was walking my dog, I could not walk my dog this morning without passing by somebody who was walking or running or having their dog. It was really annoying because I don't want my dog to feel uncomfortable either. Although she loves animals, she loves dogs. She would much rather probably have a dog take her for a walk than me. But anyway. So that's definitely something to think about when you're thinking about places that you're maybe wanting to live and how that's going to affect your mental health. I did not think about that when I moved here, because I was certainly anxious and depressed when I moved here, but it has gotten worse. And I am starting to realize that maybe it is where I live that's the problem. So anyway, this article continues on here and says a few of the features of urban environments that research has found can have a positive impact on mental health. Green spaces, active spaces, social spaces, and safe spaces. And I will say one of the things I'm planning on doing, there's a really pretty garden near me that I would love to go to and just check out. It's been too hot. Because I don't like summer. So my goal is to go there during the fall. And they also have a butterfly garden. And so butterflies tend to be more prevalent during the fall, which is my understanding. So I'm going to try and go there in the fall. Let's move on. There's another article here. It says, here's how living in a city can mess with your mental health. So similar topic, but let's go through here and read what this is saying. As an urbanite, I enjoy many things about city living, such as walking to quaint local coffee shops and restaurants, attending cultural events, meeting people from diverse backgrounds. But even though living in a metropolis can be exciting, there are some downsides. For instance, heavy traffic makes it challenging for me to socialize with my urban friends. Where I'm currently living, I don't really have much in the way of friends, but there is public transportation, and that's really helpful to getting around. I have a love-hate relationship with the public transportation because I think it's great with respect to getting around town, but at the same time, it also messes with my mental health. And that's why I go into the office really early, because I just don't want to have that interaction on the public transportation. So anyway, goes on here to say that compared to rural residents, researchers have found that urbanites are 21% more likely to have anxiety disorders and 39% more likely to have mood disorders. And a 2017 meta-analysis also found that rates of following mental health conditions were higher among those living in urban areas, such as PTSD, anger management, and generalized anxiety disorder, which I have been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. The same was true for more serious psychological disorders like schizophrenia and paranoia. So what's the explanation? According to psychiatrists, urban living gives the brain a workout. Oh, that's so true. Which alters how we cope with stress. That's so true. I'm just like, yeah. My brain doesn't get a chance to relax. And honestly, when I go to Pilates, that's like a vacation, a 1 hour vacation for my brain. And that's one of the reasons why I love going, because I don't really think about anything else except for what I'm doing in the Pilates class. But anyway, the article goes on here and says, here's how it works. The constant stimulation of city life can propel the body into a stressful state known as fight or flight response. Yes, we've talked about that in other episodes. I did a whole episode on that type of response, so I would go and check that out because I learned a lot doing that episode. It says that can make us more vulnerable to mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, and substance use. This might help explain why 19.1% of Americans live with anxiety disorder, why 6.7% have depression. City living can also chip away at your psychological immune system, which can be precarious for those with a family history of mental illness. According to psychologists, this environmental stress can increase the risk of developing a psychiatric condition such as anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. Even though urban living may lead to emotional distress, shame, and stigma, can stop young adults from talking about their struggles. This may explain why they feel lonelier than older generations, according to a Cigna study. What's more, young adults, especially millennials, often feel burnout, a stress state of mental and physical exhaustion that can squeeze the joy out of life. Yeah, that's how I feel right now with my job, just in general. I definitely feel burnout. The retirement age should be 50. I'd retire right now in a heartbeat if I could. I am still considering retiring on disability, but I'm trying to go through this exposure therapy and just therapy in general and hoping that helps. And to a point, it's helped with getting me out of the house to Pilates, but I know I have a long way to go. So it's just a matter of getting there. But anyway, older generations may view millennials as incompetent adults who shy away from responsibility. But as Anne Helen Peterson wrote from BuzzFeed, millennials have errand paralysis and think they should always be working. For young adults living in cities that never sleep, this belief may be intensified, adding to a psychological hardship of urban dwelling. True that. All right, so going on to this, in this article says living in a city can also affect your sleep quality and cardiovascular health. And I tend to not have problem with sleep. I am on sleep medication, but I tend to lean towards sleep when I'm most depressed. I would just much rather sleep through the depression than be a part of it. But anyway, so it says not only can city life affect our mental well-being, it can also affect our physical health as well. Which I will say, yes, my mental health has certainly affected my physical health. There's no question in my mind. I developed heart palpitations because of it. I tend to get headaches because of it, nauseous, and vertigo. My physical symptoms is what got me on this journey because I did have physical symptoms and went to the doctor about it and found out what I was feeling was anxiety and had never really understood that. But anyway, it says it seems traffic noise may interfere with sleep quality and cause cortisol, the stress hormone, to spike. Over time, elevated levels of this hormone can increase a person's risk for developing cardiovascular disease. It also seems that urban dwellers may be more prone to insomnia and sleep difficulties. According to the survey, 6% of people living in highly lit urban areas slept less than 6 hours each night. And I will say I do not do that. I am very aware of how important sleep is, and I will make sure that I get to bed at a reasonable hour so I can have 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night. And if I have to be at work at 6:30 the next day, I'm usually in bed really early the previous night just so I can get that sleep. And I'm thankful now that I don't have to go into the office because that allows me to do Pilates in the morning, which gives me a later start. And that's also has helped my mental health, is not having to worry about getting up early. Because I tend to, if I have to go into the office, I tend to not sleep well. I think about it all night long, that I'm going to have to get up to my alarm, which I don't particularly like getting up to my alarm because that causes anxiety because of my PTSD, and it's just a whole big thing. So anyway, here's how to help prevent city living from harming your mental health and physical well-being. Spend time outdoors. Spending too much time surrounded by concrete can cause bad case of city living blues. Busy urbanites may worry, however, they don't have enough time to spend outside. And what I say to that is make time. I have this rule of thumb that if I stop what I'm doing, whether it be through work, fun, play, whatever, causes death, then of course I need to continue working until it's complete. But if it doesn't cause deaths, if I quit what I'm doing, what I'm working on, then it can wait. And it can wait till tomorrow. So take time for yourself. As they say, put your oxygen mask on first. But anyway, it says, luckily you don't need to carve out an entire weekend to benefit from the great outdoors. Try getting outside and finding green spaces. That's what I'm going to try and do on Sunday. Not necessarily the green space, but I'm going to try and get out and go to the farmer's market. It just sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm going to try and do that. Next thing here says create a community. Connecting to your neighborhood can make it feel more like home. And I would agree with that. When I was younger, I hung out with my neighbors, the neighbor kids, because we all were around the same age. But now that I'm older, where I'm at, they're just not friendly whatsoever. That probably has an effect on my mental health too. The next thing here is exercise can help. It's no surprise that exercise is good for our physical and mental health. And I will say 100% true on that. I wish I would have started my Pilates sooner, but I also think that I wasn't mentally prepared to start it and get out of the house. But now that I'm going, it has certainly helped my mental health. There's no question in my mind. Do I still have a long way to go? Yes. But the Pilates was definitely a good first step. And I love it. I love the class. I'm doing 4 classes next week. And then the following week, I'm actually doing 5. Which I'm telling you, after 4 this week, my body is so tired. I'm really tired from it. But it was good. It was a really good workout. And I'm loving it. So I will certainly be back. And then the next thing here on the list is just talk about it. Talking about the ups and downs of city living is one way to cope with the stress. Finding others who validate your experience can confirm that you're not alone. If you're dealing with mental health concerns like depression and anxiety, therapy can help, and I would agree with that. So I didn't read this entire article, but the article comes from, it looks like healthline.com, and the article title is Here's How Living in a City Can Mess with Your Mental Health. All right, so let's move on. Next up, we're going to talk city life versus small town living. And like I said, I live in a very highly populated area, and from a somewhat small town. I think there's right around 100,000 people living in my small town. And the difference is just huge. Like here at 3 or 4 in the morning, let's say there's people out and about doing different things. And where I'm from in my small town, I actually was out at 3 something in the morning because I was leaving the hospital from having to get my dad there. So I was at the hospital with my dad. He was taken to the hospital by ambulance, and so he was in the ER. And I ended up leaving the hospital about 3 in the morning, and there was not a soul on the road. Not a single person on the road getting back to the Airbnb that I was staying at. And it was, I don't know, just relaxing knowing that there was nobody around. It was wonderful. I loved it. The article title is The City or the Country, Moving for Mental Health. And I have actually given this some thought and thinking about moving to a different city or smaller town, not necessarily from where I'm living, but just maybe getting a different job and moving to a smaller town. I think ideally, I think what would be amazing if I could keep my job and move back to the town I came from, which was rather small. But anyway, this article here talks about the differences between country living and the city. It says, with greater mental health awareness comes a better understanding of the urban effect on mental health. This understanding has resulted in the idea of the anxious city, meaning metro areas are often thought of making inhabitants prone to conditions like anxiety and depression. For many, a change of environment is key to overcoming city anxiety. In 2020 alone, the U.S. Census recorded significant population losses in cities along the major growth in rural areas. But how do you know if moving to the country is the best solution? And for me, it's because I have lived in a smaller town. Now, I would not want to live in a town that's probably less than 10,000 people, but anywhere from 80 to 100,000 is probably the right size. The next section here talks about the anxious city, meaning the background. Cities offer direct access to people, places, and opportunities that you might not find in the country. But packing so much into a small space isn't always a good idea. Studies in recent years have revealed that city residents are over 20% more likely to develop anxiety disorder and almost 40% more likely to develop a mood disorder than those in more rural areas. But why is urban living so dangerous for mental health? According to experts, cities are extremely stimulating, which I agree. Totally different. This stimulation keeps the brain in a constant state of fight or flight, which we just talked about, which damages the psychological immune system. Over time, the environmental stress makes you more susceptible to mental health. The value of healthy environment. Whether you opt for country or city living, mental health matters, but it's important to note that where you live has a significant impact on brain function. When you step outside, greatly influences your stress, anxiety levels, even on a subconscious level. Your environment also determines how safe you feel daily. Overstimulation puts your brain right back into stress mode, leaving you vulnerable to mental illness like anxiety, which affects nearly a third of adults at some point in their lives. The environmental factors of mental illness are extremely powerful. For that reason, finding where you have the great peace of mind is an essential part of maintaining your mental health. All right, so how your brain responds to the environment. The limbic system in the brain is associated with emotions and determines how we store and retrieve information. The hippocampus and the amygdala, both part of the brain's limbic system, are two structures thought to play roles in how we perceive experiences. Is it hippo or hippocampus, which consists of left and right hippocampi, helps us store memories, and the amygdala helps us prepare for danger when a memory is associated with an adverse event. The same principle can apply to the stimuli in places where we live. Seeing a story of an assault and robbery on the news can create an unpleasant memory when an individual lives in a high crime area. I will say that is so true. I actually get text messages or notifications, not necessarily text messages, from an app that tells me about the crime in the area. And I want to know about it, but it's so overwhelming how much there is. There's always something going on. And because of that, I don't feel safe here. And then, of course, you factor in the part where my car has been broken into twice, stolen once. That doesn't help make me feel safe either. That's a huge thing. But anyway, so a memory of getting lost in the middle of nowhere, feeling isolated, can make living in a rural setting tough. For a young person who grew up in a city where emergency assistance may only be a few minutes away, living in an area where emergency responders might take 30 minutes to arrive can be unsettling, which I understand that. The town that I lived in, where I'm currently at, I won't say that things were delayed by that, but there were definitely things that I couldn't get there. Not necessarily with respect to me. I thought we had great health care there. I did have to go to the ER once for asthma. But with respect to, like, my dog, finding a vet was impossible. It was really hard to find a vet. Getting an Uber, trying not to drink and drive and getting an Uber is about impossible because it is a small town. They're just not readily available. But where I'm at, they're extremely available. Differences like that certainly make a difference. Even noticed when I went back home that I went to Walmart twice, and I went to two different Walmarts that were in two completely separate areas of the city. And one was in part of the city or town, and definitely not in an area that I would consider, I wouldn't say wealthy, but maybe middle class or upper middle class. And the Walmart was so different from the other one. The other Walmart that was in the lower income part of the town was just different. The shelving, how the store was kept was different. The shelves were empty. The clothing was different. Very, I hate to say this, but very trashy clothing. And then when I went to the other one, it was very nicely kept, clean. The shelves were stocked. The clothing was different. It was, I won't say high end because it was Walmart. It had a little bit more class to it. And so even something like that can be different. And what I've noticed, something similar, not necessarily with Walmart, but where I'm living is, I would consider it's probably lower middle class, and I'll make a decent living, but out where I live, the cost of living is just insane. And so where I live, I would say is probably lower middle class, and or there's areas around here that would be considered lower middle class. And I used to go grocery shopping at some of the places, and there was one grocery store that I went to that just did not have, it was just not a nice grocery store. And the people were rude. The fruit and vegetables just didn't look very good, and just overall it was not a great location for grocery shopping. And then on top of that, somebody got mugged in the parking lot, and so I quit going there for both of those reasons. And so that kind of goes back to what this other thing was saying about safety, and you're hearing about stories. Things like that happen all the time. Not too long ago, there was a stabbing in a strip mall. And I actually have to go there occasionally because the UPS store is right there. So hearing about that just certainly does not give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. But anyway, so the pros here, it says, is that cities draw people to them mainly for opportunities, be it work, school, or leisure, which is exactly why I'm here. Cities can offer a more diverse population, which I agree. Where I'm living is very diverse population. I live in a primarily Hispanic area, and I'm the minority. I'm a white woman, and I'm the minority for sure. And that doesn't bother me at all. It's just something that I've noticed living here. The cons, though, it says the fast-paced nature of a city living isn't for everyone. Greater opportunities come with a bigger price tag, which can lead to financial strain. That is really true. It is ridiculously expensive to live here, and I would love to sell my place and move to something that's not so expensive. Urban areas also tend to have higher crime rates, which we just talked about, and can make a person feel unsafe outside their home, which I would agree, because I do. I remember when I first moved here, knowing that the area was a little bit higher crime, and I would walk my dog at 4:30 in the morning because I wanted to get to work fairly early and not try to get to work by 6:30. And when I'd walk my dog in the morning, I would just stare at the cars driving by because I kind of wanted to know who was driving by and what kind of car they were in. And so I would kind of note that things. I'm like, if anything happened to me, then I kind of want to know what car it was and so on. Just kind of get a description. And I sort of do that now, not to the extent I did back then. And that's only because I'm not walking at that hour anymore, which I tend to now walk in the morning when it's light out, although when it comes winter, it won't be. Anyway, so here's the pros and cons of country living. Pros: reduce financial strain is the biggest reason some choose to move to the country. In many cases, you'll find the cost of living decreases the further away from the city, which is true. I could live further away from the city and it would certainly be more affordable. But then I would also increase my commute time. And right now, my commute is, if I drive, it takes 45 minutes. If I take the public transportation, it takes me a half an hour. I live 10 miles away from my office building. So definitely better to take the public transportation just for that reason. But living outside of the area, which I would have to get pretty far out for that to be the case, the cost of living would certainly decrease. But then I'd have a 2-hour commute, which I'm not about to waste my time doing that. So anyway, this goes on here to say that proximity to nature is another positive aspect of country living. Spending time outdoors can greatly benefit your mental health, especially without typical urban air pollution. A quiet spot in the country can even lead to better sleep habits. And I used to own, 7 years ago, back when I had the pool, I used to own 2.5 acres. It was the best. It was such the best. I absolutely love that piece of land, and I regret every day selling it. And I regret not being able to stay in the position that I had back then. The grass is not always greener on the other side. But that property was mostly wooded, so it was really quiet. My house was somewhat away from the roadway, and the pool was really far from the road. And so sitting in my pool, it was very quiet and just amazing. And I miss those days because I don't have that kind of relaxation anymore, and I freaking miss it. I miss it so much. Anyway, it says the cons here, though, is that rural living results in a feeling of being cut off from society. It may be more difficult to get around. You might not have access to the same hobbies and entertainment as you did in the city. This can add to your list of expenses, especially if you previously lived in an area where you could get around without a car, which is exactly true. Cost $5 to take the public transportation. I think it's around that. I don't honestly know because I just use the app and it gets me in and out. I just throw money on it when I need it. Let's see. So, how to recognize when your environment is unhealthy for you. If you reside in an urban environment and find that you are most unhappy, maybe it's time for a change. Sleeplessness because of noise and constant worrying that you will be a crime victim could indicate that urban mental health issues are causing too much stress. And I totally agree. Totally agree with that. If you long for lots of human interaction, which I don't, then living in a rural area may cause anguish. Taking a break from the unhealthy environment when the place where you live feels uncertain and stressed, and you can't move to a location that's more of your liking right now, a temporary change of scenery can make a difference. Just a vacation from work can help you return with new energy. A break from your living environment can give you a new perspective. If you live in a city and need to get away from the flurry of urban activity, why not spend a few days in a rural setting and listen to the birds? And honestly, that's why I really enjoyed this place I went to back in April. It's like a 5 acre trail. I don't know what you want to call it. It's just a 5 acre, and the trails that were there were lined with flowers, and it was absolutely stunning, and I loved it. And I just felt at peace for the first time in a really long time, and that's kind of why I want to go to this garden that's near me, because I think doing that will certainly help. All right, so that ends that article. Let's move on. Does weather matter? And I know for a fact that it does. Here is an article. It's from Change Mental Health, which is an organization. And it says, weather and mental health. Weather might be a small thing in life, but it can have a huge mental and physical impact on how we feel. Planes could be scuppered amid early dark days, constant rain and blazing heat, showing that weather conditions can influence our mood, energy levels, and overall mental health. Changes in the weather often lead to fluctuations in mood and behavior. For instance, gloomy weather with reduced sunlight can lower serotonin levels, leading to seasonal affective disorder and symptoms of depression. On the other hand, extreme heat doesn't always mean improved mood. It can lead to irritability, restlessness, and even physical exhaustion, which may worsen anxiety and stress. Severe weather events or sudden changes like thunderstorms, heat waves, or cold snaps can also heighten symptoms for individuals with certain mental conditions such as PTSD or bipolar. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of weather. So, like I've said, I loathe the summer. I hate it. I hate being hot. And that's partially because I sweat really easy and I sweat a lot really easily. And it's just uncomfortable for me in the summer because I sweat and I hate it. And so I'm just not a fan of the summer. Now, give me a pool to lay out at and to float around in circles with a cocktail. That's a totally different story. The types of days that I do love is I love rainy weather, just like those days where it just drizzles all day long or rains all day long or on and off all day. I love severe weather. I love thunderstorms. And I also really love snow. And the place where I used to live was in the northern part of the US. And so we had snow like 6 months out of the year, and I freaking loved it. I loved it so freaking much. It almost reminded me of my childhood because if you want to talk about climate change, back when I was a kid, my hometown used to get enough snow where we could go sledding on the street. We could build like snow forts, and we would like stuff the snow into a small trash can and then turn it over, and then that would make our snow fort. We would do that several times. I could make snowmen. We had a lot of snow. Not as much as the northern part of the US, but certainly more than what they have now. And I just loved it. The snow piles up over the winter, and it stays around because it's always cold, and I just love everything about it. So I'm a little bit different than those folks who don't like that type of weather. I absolutely love it and would move back to that place in a heartbeat. So anyway, this thing says myths about weather. Weather doesn't significantly affect mental health, and we all know that it does. Weather triggered mood changes are purely psychological. Weather changes can physically impact the body, including altering hormone levels, disrupting sleep, and influencing brain chemistry, all of which can contribute to poor mental health. Rainy days only make people sad, and I can tell you for a fact that is not true, because I love rainy days. Rainy days are my favorite. Rainy weather can have a calming effect on some people, providing a sense of coziness. That's exactly for me. I especially love during the winter that getting in my jammies or staying in my jammies all day, and it's snowing out and slippers on, toasty warm on the inside. And oh yeah, I just love everything about it. Anyway, so how does weather affect mental health? And we talked about seasonal affective disorder, heat and irritability, isolation of extreme weather, and sensory overload. Bright sunlight, high winds, or intense storms can overstimulate people. And I can tell you for a fact with me, that's true. So, where I used to live, like in my hometown, which was Midwest, it would be really hot in July and August, like the hottest time of the year. Temperatures into the hundreds, really humid. It was just yuck. It would feel like it was never ending. And I would just, the longer it lasted, the longer the heat lasted, if it was several weeks, I would start to get really anxious because I would be longing for a break from that heat. And eventually that does come in mid to late August, where temperatures tend to drop away from the hundreds and will be more so in the 80s. But just in general, several weeks of hundreds is just not my thing. Climate anxiety, increasing frequency of extreme weathers, even locally or globally, such as storms, floods, and heat waves. Heat waves for sure bug me. Storms and floods, I kind of dig. I like it. And then financial worries with respect to having high energy bills due to heating or cooling. So what can you do? You can embrace natural light, spend time outdoors, stay active indoors, which I hate working out inside my house. It's so boring, but necessary. I go to Pilates 4 to 5 days a week, and then on the weekend I'll work out downstairs on my elliptical, and oh my gosh, it's so boring. But I'm trying to lose weight and get fit, get back to my active self, and that's a part of it. Practice relaxation techniques. Whether it's rainy, snowy, or unbearably hot, relaxation techniques like deep breathing, meditation, grounding, and mindfulness can help manage stress and improve overall well-being. And something I did recently, and I didn't really know I was doing it until I talked to my counselor, but she was saying that I was practicing mindfulness, and what she meant by that was because on my first trip home back in June, I did not listen to the radio mostly while on my way. I did listen to it a little bit on my way there, but for the most part, I did not. On my way home, I listened to no radio whatsoever. And it's all starting to make sense why. Because I am so overstimulated living here that driving somewhere with no radio kind of gives me some form of mindfulness, relaxation. And I don't listen to the radio very often on my way to a Pilates class. I don't listen to the radio. I don't listen to it on the way back home. Like I drive into work, I don't necessarily listen to the radio. And so it's just something that I've been doing, but it allows me to be aware of my surroundings. If I'm driving, like for example, to my hometown, I am more aware of my driving and paying attention to my driving. I'm more aware of what is around me, whether it be the cars, trees, flowers. I just tend to notice things. And my counselor was like, that's mindfulness because I'm aware of my surroundings and being very mindful of that. So it definitely helped. I really enjoyed not listening to the radio. So definitely helped. It's not for everybody, but it helped me out. So anyway, planning for weather changes, be proactive, can make a big difference in how you handle weather-related mental health challenges. Monitor the weather. Stock up on items like sunscreen, warm clothing, and rain gear. And have a safety plan for certain weather conditions, which is always good. Okay, now we're going to talk about home environment. This is what I was alluding to earlier when I talked about the different things or different topics we were going to touch on today. And the house I used to have when I lived in my previous town, that was smaller. I loved my house. It fit me in every way possible. It was really cute. It was unique. It had just really cute character about it. I loved everything about it. And like I said, where I'm currently living, it is so freaking boring. I hate it. It doesn't fit me whatsoever. And that's probably part of the reason of my anxiety and depression as well, because it's just not a place where I consider home. Like when I first initially moved here, I felt like I was living in somebody else's house. I have never felt that way. I've moved a lot in the last several years, and I never felt that way before, except for where I'm currently living. I still feel like it's somebody else's house. But I am trying to make changes to make it more my own, but I don't know what else to do. It's boring. Boring. Okay, so let's talk about that. There's an article here where it says creating a healthy home environment. Practice tidiness. And right now, that's a little difficult for me. And the only reason is because I am doing a lot to the house. So I have things out all over the house, like paint cans, measuring tapes, tools. It's just everywhere in the house. And I'm going to hopefully sometime soon go through all of it and maybe get some of that put away. But I'm also going to have to go through my storage downstairs and get rid of some of that so I have room for all the things that I've been using to help with upgrading the house. But anyway, so practicing tidiness. Normally, under normal circumstances, I do keep a fairly tidy home. I am particular about where things go, and I won't say I'm anal, but some might say that. But it says here, it doesn't need to be spotless, but clutter can be harmful to your mental state. And I think it is. How cluttered my house is right now makes my skin crawl. But at the same time, I also don't want to put anything away because I may need it with respect to upgrading my house. Once that's all finished, then I can put it away. Or maybe at least put some of it away. I know I'm not going to be using some paint cans that I've already painted the room or whatever. But anyway, so what can I do to create a tidy space? Start small. Beginning to improve your space feels overwhelming. Choose one area to start and work on that until it's finished, and then go on to choose another place to work on. Be mindful throughout the day instead of putting items down and adding to your clutter. Get in the habit of putting it away. And I am very off and on about this. Early on I was talking about a Be Normal campaign and putting things away. And I was doing that pretty regularly then. And I have since fallen off the wagon, if you will, and tend to let things sit around longer than I would prefer. I think that has a lot to do with the depression. Sometimes when I'm depressed, I just don't care. But then there are days where I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I will clean up stuff. And I am on medication to kind of help motivate me. Practicing mindfulness while cleaning. One study found that people who were mindful while washing dishes, taking time to smell the soap, feel the water, and absorb the experience, reported a 27% reduction in nervousness, along with 25% of improvement of mental inspiration. Oh, that's interesting. Once your space feels clean, think about the organization, how you can maximize your space, and be intentional about organizing to avoid future clutter. One of the things I do best is organize, and under normal circumstances, I am more organized, but just given that I'm upgrading the house, I haven't been that way. And I'm taking my sweet time. For crying out loud, I've lived here for 2 years, and I'm taking my time upgrading things. For the most part, finished with my cabinets. That took me like a year. I've literally have a vanity sitting in my hallway that's been there for a year and a half, maybe. I can't remember when I bought it. I think it was like October of 24. Here we are in 2026. And I just recently started removing the old vanity, so I'm hoping to get to that this weekend. But it's things like that. I'm not in a time crunch. I don't have any reason to get it done sooner. And so I just am taking my time. But it will be nice to get the vanity in just because it literally has been sitting in my hallway for probably almost 2 years now, which is pretty irritating. Get rid of unneeded belongings. That is actually one of the things I love, love, love to do is get rid of things. That I actually went through here recently with my closets to get rid of things like clothing. And I would like to do it again and toss some more things. Mainly because so I've got 2 closets in the main bedroom, and one of them is more of my everyday clothing and the other one is more work type clothes. And the one that I have everyday clothing in is just getting just tons of clothing in it. It has a lot of clothes in it. And so what I want to do is narrow that down and just get rid of stuff. So it says here, create comfort. A big part of mentally healthy living situation is feeling your space gives you comfort, support, and calming energy, which it does none of that for me. This could look like keeping a comfort items around your favorite blanket, meaningful gift, or a candle. There is a candle downstairs that I like to light that is just, I love it. It really makes the house smell good. But that's about it. I do find it comforting, but it's a candle. But when I first moved here, I had an idea of what I was going to do my room, like how I was going to decorate my room. And I got it decorated that way, and I hate it. It's not at all soothing. It's not comforting. And so what I need to do, and I think what I'd like to do, is get the rest of the house done, and then I can come back to my bedroom and choose a different color. I would really like to do, I think, some soft pinks and maybe some lavender purples. Better looks okay, but it's not, it doesn't make it, what am I trying to say? It's not relaxing. My bedroom is just not relaxing. And it's purple. It's like a deep purple, which is one of my favorite colors, but it just doesn't, it's just not relaxing. Anyway, so where can you create comfort? Notice how you feel in different parts of your home, which I don't feel comfortable in any parts of my home. Notice there's not a one size fits all for a home, and so you might want to rework things a few times before you find what's best, which I agree. I had this vision of my bedroom, and while it turned out how I thought it would, it did not give me the feeling that I thought it would. My old home that I had, my bedroom was like a really beautiful blue gray. I won't say it was more blue than gray. It was just a really soft tone blue color. And I loved it. It was so beautiful. And I had like yellow accents all over. And it was just a really beautiful room. I loved it. Anyway, so don't let finances prevent you from changing your space, which I agree. It costs a lot to upgrade a house. That's also another reason why I've been doing it for 2 years, because there was a long list of things I wanted to do. And if I spread it out over 2 years, then it makes it a lot easier to do. And personalize your space. Photos of loved ones, display favorite belongings, decorate with intention. And I will say, I do not have any photos of family up. I tend to, I won't say I'm a minimalist, because I'm not, but I tend to want my home with minimal decorations. And so I don't have any photos of my family. Now, in my old house, I did. I had a shelving unit that had 3 or 4 shelves and a cabinet on the bottom. And so I had my family pictures in that. It was downstairs, so nobody saw it. But I did have family pictures. And honestly, I haven't even got to the basement here to decorate. I have an idea of what I like to do, but and then maybe when I do that, I will incorporate my family pictures. But for now, they're just stacked, honestly, I think downstairs. When moving isn't possible, what can you do? And I think a lot of that has to do with what has been said in this article, is making your house a home and a place where you can be comfortable. And I have not been able to do that. Also, too, creating a safe space. So, like this article is saying, a favorite blanket, favorite chair, maybe go to a walking trail, coffee shop that you like, finding places around that you can find comfort in. And I will say, my Pilates studio is one of them. I freaking love it so much. I cannot say enough good things about it. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And on top of that, yes, it has helped my mental health in a lot of ways, but it's also helped me physically. I was thinking that when I initially started, it was an assignment to get out of the house. And I did do that, and I was able to overcome the anxiety for the most part to go to Pilates. And I was wanting to lose weight, and so since then I have been keeping track of my calories and what I eat, and I actually eat a high protein diet because I want to build muscle from going to Pilates, and I think it's happening. In just 3 months, I can see definition now in my arms. Because of that, it's helped in a lot of ways. I'm down a size. I can get up and down the stairs a lot better. I noticed recently that my belly doesn't touch the steering wheel in my car, which before it did. Clothes obviously are getting a little bit bigger on me. I actually took somewhat before picture, and I sent a recent picture to my best friend and showed her the difference, and she could tell there was a difference. She could also tell that I had some muscle definition in my arm. It's definitely helping physically and mentally in more ways than I anticipated. I was really trying to get out of the house, and honestly, that hour is like my little hour vacation, middle break that I get, which is wonderful in all ways. The key takeaways for today's episode is your surroundings matter, whether it be a big city or a small town, what you have on the inside of your home, the people you surround yourself with, the places that you go, and the weather all has an effect on your mental health. And I honestly I did not think that I knew that my surroundings had an effect on my mental health, but it really wasn't until reading through all these articles that it has a way more of an effect on me than I thought it did. So I just have to now think of what's next. What can I do to help that if I have to stay here? I honestly, one of the things I was telling myself the other day, I actually tried to come out here for a job in 2018 and I didn't get the job, which is a bummer, but it's the way it goes. And I said to myself here recently, I'm like, I was better prepared then to live here than I am now. I was more mentally ready to live in a big town, and I think I'm not ready to live here because of all the things that have happened to me over the last 6 years with respect to my mental health and my anxiety, depression, PTSD, and agoraphobia. So yeah, anyway, I think next is really trying to figure out what's next and how I'm going to make this house a home. If today's episode helped you look at your surroundings in a new way, I'd love for you to share that with me. I always like hearing about stories from people. Remember that anxiety and depression don't define us. Sometimes healing begins with something as simple as changing the space around you, which, again, I'm going to have to figure out how to do that for myself because right now I just don't know. So anyway, until next time, take care of yourself, be kind to your mind, and remember, you are not alone in this mental health journey. So I want to thank you for joining me. We'll talk to you later. Bye. If today's episode of Real Stories, Real Struggles, and Real Hope resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps others find this space and feel less alone.